This video is sponsored by Crunchyroll. It's no exaggeration to say that Breath of the Wild 2's trailer has been broken down to the point where discovering new information is close to impossible, especially since it's been well over a year since the announcement and we're still waiting for more news on the game. Overall, 2020 has been a very dry year in terms of upcoming titles, and for reasons I'm sure you already know about. Aside from Origami King, we really don't know what Nintendo's plans are for this year. With Sony's presentation of the PS5 and its upcoming titles, along with the Xbox Game Showcase in a couple weeks, many of us are holding out for a Nintendo Direct. Whether we get one or not, we'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, there's an abundance of theories regarding Breath of the Wild 2's overall story, the gameplay, and mysteries present in the first game which may be solved in its sequel. When it comes to these theories, over time people will come to a general consensus. Essentially, an opinion held by the majority of people. That in itself is completely fine. But what tends to happen is that the general consensus turns into an assumption. Rather than a theory, it becomes solidified as an undeniable fact. Sometimes, even articles or translations can be taken the wrong way, and by the time the error is rectified, thousands of people are spreading that narrative. Recently, there was a mistranslation regarding the Spanish dub of Breath of the Wild 2, which fans quickly pointed out was incorrect. Point is, whether it be assumptions based off of the trailer or interviews taken out of context, Breath of the Wild 2 is filled with several misconceptions. This video in particular will go over several ones we found worth discussing. Again, many of these are backed by evidence, in fact several of them have a good chance of being true. The purpose of this video is explaining why each one is a theory and not a fact. First off, a couple minor ones. Breath of the Wild 2 is a sequel. This might sound silly, but I've had a handful of people mention the possibility of the game taking place before the events of Breath of the Wild, believing it to be a prequel. But that's kind of hard to prove when the trailer literally tells us that the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is now in development. Another argument which frequently circulates the internet is the identity of the sealed corpse, that it doesn't necessarily have to be Ganondorf's. The second person many people connect it to is Demise from Skyward Sword. The problem with this lies in the lack of evidence, especially in comparison to the case for Ganondorf. The figure wears jewelry with the symbol of the Gerudo, which Demise has no ties to, and a stylized version of that symbol is present on the bits of cloth worn. The walls depict a man horseback wielding a trident. The weapon is deeply connected to Ganondorf's boar-like form seen in the Fallen timeline, and while the Gerudo is never seen with it in-game, we know that Four Swords Adventures Ganondorf stole it from the pyramid and became the King of Darkness. And Ocarina of Time pits you against a phantom version of Ganondorf, who wields a trident. This isn't even taking into account his possible connections to the Ganondorf from Twilight Princess, with the hole in his chest and jewel crowning the forehead. This is a special case where it's safe to assume the identity of the corpse, or, at the very least, prove that it isn't Demise, as his spirit was trapped in the Master Sword. Sometimes the simplest answer is also the most likely. And before it ends up not being Ganondorf and we were all wrong.
The overall reception of Breath of the Wild 2's announcement was, as expected, overwhelmingly positive. It wasn't long until articles discussing the trailer flooded the internet, including one from IGN, which was an interview with Aonuma. They discussed the darker tones seen in the trailer and related to Majora's Mask, and Aonuma's response led many to believe that the game will be darker than the N64 title. Now, this is a big one, and I'm honestly surprised just how many people have taken this as fact, which makes me wonder just how many people have actually read the quote and which ones are simply repeating what they heard from others. Because when you read the actual interview, it becomes pretty clear that Aonuma isn't making this statement. Let's start off by reading the actual quote itself. IGN asks, "It seemed like this was a dark twist on Breath of the Wild that reminded me of Majora's Mask. Was that on purpose? To which Anuma says, the new Breath of the Wild or the sequel to it is not necessarily going to be related to Majora's Mask or inspired by it. It just happened to be that what we showed you currently is a little bit darker, and we're honestly still in production, so we can't really say exactly how it's going to be turning out. It is this part that got people all riled up. But notice how he isn't referring to anything specifically. He simply says, what we showed you here is a little bit darker. He doesn't say it's darker than Majora's Mask, just darker. In fact, he goes out of his way to exclaim that the sequel is not related or inspired by it. The structure of some of the sentences also seems a bit off in some areas, indicating that there might be a certain degree of a language barrier influencing the translation. However, it's highly likely that when he says the game will be darker, he's making a generalization. He could just as well be referring to Breath of the Wild. The language barrier aside, it's hard to say exactly what he means. Yet many people have fully accepted that this game will surpass Majora's Mask's grim atmosphere. Now, we definitely don't want to burst anyone's bubble here, and on the positive side, just because Anuma isn't necessarily saying that the game will be darker than Majora's Mask, doesn't mean that this game won't be dark. What we see in the trailer is already way more foreboding and creepy than anything we've ever seen in Breath of the Wild. At the same time, we also don't want people to set themselves up for disappointment. So take this quote with a grain of salt, and let's wait patiently for more Breath of the Wild 2 news, which will finally reveal what this game will actually be all about. When breaking down the trailer, it's also important to understand how the way it's presented may contradict the final product. Many trailers for movies are purposely arranged in a way to mislead the viewer, so that aspects of it remain unspoiled. This includes moving the order of the shots around, essentially changing the context of the scenes. And that's why the chronological order of the trailer should be taken with a grain of salt. Just because Hyrule Castle is seen rising after Ganondorf wakes up doesn't mean that this is the proper order of events. It very well could, but it's equally possible that the reverse is true. In fact, who is to say that this is even the beginning or end of the game? Until we get more news on the story, every part of this trailer should be questioned. The good news is that there are elements which can help us break down the order of events, such as the torches and the animal mount. Instead of explaining it all here, you can check out a video on my channel where we dissect the trailer shots and rearrange them in a believable way. But again, don't take it as fact. Now, we should probably address the elephant in the room when it comes to assumptions and misconceptions. That good old Z word, which we won't mention for the sake of
Zonai.
Anyways, while this tribe's structures are present all across Hyrule, there isn't a single mention of them in-game. In fact, the only time we see their names come up is when we enter their home base, titled Zonai Ruins. The only information on them is either from the Barbarian gear or within Masterworks. It wasn't until Breath of the Wild 2's trailer where the popularity of this tribe rose significantly. It has become one of the game's greatest mysteries. You see, the trailer mostly consists of an underground cavern which Link and Zelda are traversing. Throughout the shots, a couple of them stand out as we can see architecture resembling that of Zonai designs. The wall to the left of the duo with carvings of an owl and dragon, two of the three creatures frequently used in Zonai Ruins. There's a bridge of which it supports resembles some sort of animal, perhaps a dragon. But more importantly, we have actual Zonai architecture present, these pillars in the water. They have the same snake pair engraving as those located in Zonai locales. And if we bring up a popular theory of the three elements of malice, ancient energy, and the green substance being tied to the virtues of power, wisdom, and courage, combined with the fact that the Zonai ruins are close to the Spring of Courage, has led many to assume that the hand holding Ganondorf down is of Zonai origin. This, of course, isn't impossible, however, it's a bit too early to conclude that this hand is, without a doubt, Zonai related. It's very different to our Ganondorf example. There's more than enough evidence to state that the corpse can't be anyone else. Some videos tend to use this Zonai hand as the foundation of a theory, when in reality the connections can be chalked up as odd coincidences. And while we do see Zonai architecture in the trailer, this doesn't mean that the Zonai as a whole will be a major part of the story. They could be a minor reference or not even mentioned at all. There's nothing wrong with creating theories on their origin or potential role in the sequel. It's just important to understand and accept that there is an equal chance of the tribe having little to no influence on Breath of the Wild 2's plot.
Speaking of misconceptions, one of the things that many people assume is that I live and breathe Zelda. And while that's technically true, given how I do this full-time, I do have a list of other hobbies. Those include collecting LEGO Star Wars, playing non-Nintendo games such as Hitman and Persona 5, and watching anime. Well, thanks to Crunchyroll Premium, I'm able to stream a variety of shows ad-free in full 1080p HD. It can get quite expensive to purchase physical copies of these shows, so being able to watch an unlimited amount of anime for a monthly fee is 10 out of 10 would buy again. And right now, at this moment, if you go to the link in the description, crunchyroll.com/NintendoBC, you can sign up for a 14-day free trial of Crunchyroll Premium. Premium gives you access to professionally subtitled episodes, whether it be on your console, phone, or Sheikah Slate. I'm always watching new shows, and one of the best parts about these sponsors is sharing those experiences with you. A couple shows I highly recommend are Tower of God, an anime adaptation of a popular webtoon series, and one of my personal favorites, Attack on Titan. Especially since its final season will be airing this fall, and it looks like hype. If you too love the idea of humanity fighting giant naked people, just go to the link in the description and sign up. That's crunchyroll.com/NintendoBC. Back in June of 2019, there was a video discussing the possible timeline placement for Breath of the Wild and its sequel. One segment of it focused on the green spiraling energy, where it stated that bits of the pattern translate to the phrase Seal Ganon. This was based on its resemblance to Gerudo script. This information was quickly spread throughout the internet, whether it be articles or other theory videos. And it's so frequently brought up in my Discord, even to this day. With that being said, let's break down the accuracy of this translation. We'll adjust the brightness and contrast of the image to make things much more clearer. For the seal portion in particular, you'll quickly come to realize that the closest match is the S, and even then, it's not very accurate. In fact, I'd argue that it looks more like a J. The cluster of symbols in the middle is too crowded to make out any individual letters, and the one at the end is simply a squiggly line. Things get much messier with the Ganon. At best, this part resembles an A, but why position it sideways? The biggest problem with translating these swirls is both their quantity and unpredictability. You could take any frame of them conveniently lining up in which it vaguely resembles a letter or symbol. Let's take this one in the background, for example. If we rotate the symbol meant to represent a Sheikah script's G, it looks very similar. I don't think it's crazy to suggest that the energy may be a sort of new language, or even that it's a stylized version of Gerudo script. But aside from a couple potential matches, there isn't enough for us to make any definitive translations. One topic I want to briefly brush on is the setting of the trailer. It's in some sort of underground caverns, but where exactly? The popular theory is that Ganondorf is sealed directly under Hyrule Castle, which is something that I'm totally on board with. The reason I want to bring this up comes from a DM I received last year, where a guide to Nintendo mentioned the corpse being sealed deep within the caverns of Hyrule Castle. The same image was shared with other theorists, and this is the very definition of a misconception. We all know that there's a good chance of Ganondorf being below the castle, but in this case we have a book stating that to be an undeniable fact. It falls under the same issues as Hyrule Historia. It wasn't written by Nintendo, therefore its canonicity must be taken with a grain of salt. And we can't forget about this cave entrance. If this does lead to the room with Ganondorf, details such as the location of the entrance and how far the cave system spans are key in pinpointing where we are in the trailer. Breath of the Wild's story was presented in a very unique way compared to past Zelda titles. Bits and pieces of what happened 100 years ago were scattered across journal entries, NPC dialogue, and the memory system in which Link visits several locations to recover his past. This presentation style meant that most of the game's plot was set in the past. In fact, the player would only confront Zelda once saving her from the final boss. Since the trailer to Breath of the Wild sequel takes place after these events, the story can go in several different directions. Zelda may accompany us for most of the game, or perhaps we'll get split up in the beginning and a good chunk of the story will be looking for her. One thing that people state with absolute certainty is that Zelda will be playable in Breath of the Wild 2. The duo are consistently seen together in the past memories, and now that she has been freed, they will continue to travel together for the length of the game. But this doesn't necessarily mean that Zelda will be playable. The idea of a playable Zelda and co-op was brought up in the same interview as the one with Majora's Mask. It's kind of interesting that you bring that up, because in Breath of the Wild, you see Zelda and Link together often too. So to go straight into the thought of co-op is very interesting to me. He's not confirming nor denying the possibility, but acknowledges how a certain narrative is being pushed due to past cutscenes. Lots of people are assuming that Zelda will have some sort of playability simply because she's seen traveling with Link. But there are other potential motives for putting the two together. Perhaps it's to give Link lines without him having to speak, or it will be used as a setup for the plot. Or maybe in Wind Waker's case with the final boss. She plays an assistant role, but acts on her own without control of the player. Either way, I'm interested in seeing how this will play out. Me, personally, I totally want to see this happen. One way it could work is if the gender chosen affects who you play as, but I'm getting off topic. Zelda could be playable, and she might not be. Until we get more information, that's the undeniable truth. Last but not least, it's time for what I believe to be one of the biggest misconceptions of the trailer. One which, to this day, I hear about all the time on Twitter and YouTube comments. The music and supposed lyrics that play in the background of the trailer. There's several different points to discuss, and I'll let Monster Maze address the first one.
There's a rumor that the music we hear in the first half of the E3 trailer is a bastardization of the Game Over theme found in Zelda on NES. I don't know exactly who started this rumor, but it seems to stem back from the first few weeks or months when the trailer was still brand new, when everyone and their mother were probably reversing the audio to see if they could find anything hidden. And even though it's an old rumor, it's still referenced as fact by a significant amount of people and even reported by different outlets. So let's clear the air here. The music has nothing to do with this classic theme. If we compare the trailer music to the Game Over theme, it immediately becomes obvious that there's a lot of things that simply do not match. By the way, if you want a second opinion from someone who has already analyzed this a while ago, go check out the analysis by Chockrit. A lot of what I'm about to mention here is derived from his initial findings. The original Game Over theme is in C major, whereas the music from the trailer seems to be in F sharp. Even if you don't have any knowledge of music theory, you can audibly hear that both songs have a very different tone to them. The Game Over theme, despite its implication of, well, dying, has a positive vibe to it, since that's what a major scale sounds like. The Breath of the Wild 2 trailer music sounds ominous and foreboding. It's hard to determine the exact key, because the notes are so weirdly spaced, we don't exactly know where the song stops or starts. But let me assure you that a C major is not part of it. The second thing that clashes is the measure and timing of the notes. The Game Over theme is a regular, straightforward 4/4 time with 4 quarter notes playing each bar. The trailer music is in 3/4 time, so it takes 3 loops of the Game Over theme for the trailer theme to complete 4. Again, the trailer music is very weirdly timed, and it speeds up and slows down throughout the trailer. The most clear indication of a beat or timing can be found when we play the trailer music backwards. Which, according to the theories, is when you are supposed to hear the Game Over theme. And well, by that logic, the same thing goes the other way around. If we play the Game Over theme in reverse, we should be hearing the trailer music. As you can clearly hear, it's simply not there. Even in reverse, the Game Over theme still doesn't sound ominous or foreboding. And playing the two songs at the same time reveals just how many conflicting notes there really are. We can go above and beyond, we can transpose the scale of one to match the other, we can reverse, rearrange, change the timing of one to match the other, but still no luck. We have heard hidden melodies in Breath of the Wild before, like the slowed down Temple of Time music. The Hyrule Castle theme during the old man's appearance, and many more examples of secret melodies hidden within a track. If this really was the Game Over theme, it would be there clear as day. I've even seen theories that claim that the music we hear is a messed up version of Xan's theme from Twilight Princess, because quote unquote it sounds similar. Just the fact that different people hear different things in this little piece speaks volumes about the confirmation bias we have. Which is understandable. As humans, we tend to look for patterns even when there are none. Just because something sounds similar or has a couple of notes that match doesn't make it a fact. I hope this demonstration made this clear. Now, just because this particular theory holds very little ground, it doesn't mean we don't encourage people to continue trying to solve this puzzle. Perhaps there really is something hidden here and we simply haven't found it yet. Perhaps there really is something hidden.
Perhaps there really is something hidden here and we simply haven't found it yet. Na zdrowie.
What Monster Maze briefly addressed there, regarding how humans tend to look for patterns, also applies to music with lyrics. When listened to in reverse, many people were quick to attach lyrics to the trailer. The most frequent one I see is along the lines of, "Poor Hyrule, for Link has found the body." And when playing the reversed music with those lyrics in mind, it doesn't sound too far off. But now I'm going to select some other lyrics made by YouTube commenters. Listen to the music with these lines in mind. "Poor Hyrule, your king is now unguarded." "O Hylia, help me please find my body." "O Hyrule, for it is time to party." You gotta admit, each one does sound likely. But now, let's take it a step further. I'm going to play a part of the soundtrack from the anime Sword Art Online. Now, listen to it again, but with the following lyrics in mind. Coffee, soda, toffee, pasta. Coffee, soda, give me coffee. I'd argue that these lyrics match the song much more than the ones from Breath of the Wild 2's trailer. Thing is, unless you already knew of the coffee soda meme, the music would have sounded nothing like the lyrics I posted. And that is the Mondegreen effect. A mishearing or misinterpretation of a phrase in a way that gives it a new meaning. Mondegreens are most often created by a person listening to a poem or a song. The listener, being unable to clearly hear a lyric, substitutes words that sound similar and make some kind of sense. The lyrics only add up with the music because you're listening to it with the intent of matching it to what's really being sung. And this is exactly why I never address any sort of lyrics people claim to hear or try to use it as concrete evidence for a theory. Because confirmation bias is a real thing. It's something we always do. If you go into the music believing those are the lyrics, chances are you're going to hear that. There might be a hidden message in the song, I just highly doubt it. And we have present-day examples of the Mondegreen effect. Back in April, Kotaku had accused Persona 5 of using a disability slur in its music. What they heard was the phrase, retarded. In fact, I'll play the clip here. Now, obviously, Atlus did not use this word in their music. Most people believe the correct lyrics were retorted, but this is a perfect example of how our brains can try to match lyrics with music. Another great example comes from Pokemon. Remember how people thought everything about it was satanic? Well, one of the arguments used was how, when played backwards, the theme song of the show sounded like the phrase, "I love you, Satan." Now, there are times when people hide messages behind reversed audio. In fact, the best example I can think of also comes from Pokemon. This is a clip from episode 130, The Whistle Stop.
Well, then we'll just have to take it from ya. Look at Tom go!
Victory Bell 2!
Do whatever you have to do to get that Pikachu.
Nothing strange here, right? Well, let's listen to it again, but this time with the clip reversed. Listen to what James says when swallowed by Victory Bell.
Leo Burnett and 4 kids are the devil! Leo Burnett!
If you missed it, James said Leo Burnett and 4 kids are the devil.
Leo Burnett and 4 kids are the devil! Leo Burnett!
And it's pretty clear that those are the proper lines. So if Nintendo really wanted to put in some sort of hidden message in the lyrics, I feel it would have been a bit more obvious to make out. Of course, those are our thoughts. Before we end this video, once again, a huge thanks to Crunchyroll for sponsoring the episode. Remember that if you go to the link below, crunchyroll.com/NintendoBC, you can sign up for a 14-day free trial of Crunchyroll Premium. Aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sure there are some other misconceptions or assumptions of Breath of the Wild 2 that I missed, so feel free to post them down below. Special thanks to Monster Maze for joining me on this video. I do recommend checking out his stuff, as well as a collaboration I did with him, which also happened to be his very first video. A link to that will be down below. Special thanks to my patrons, you are all awesome. Other important links such as Discord and Twitter will be down below, and I'll see you all next time.